Hey folks, welcome back to Only Best Fancy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about Firebrand by Kristen. And this is the sixth book in the Green Rider series, and it's a pretty significant turning point in the series. So, this comes off the heels of Mirror Sight, which, if you didn't see my video for that, I thought was a very tangential entry into the series. Like, it was interesting, it had its good moments, but overall, like, that book could have been cut, and they're like it could have been cut and it didn't really add much. It wouldn't make much difference to the story. It does do some significant things. It's not completely a waste of time, but it does it's like everything significant about it in terms of larger series ramification could be fit into a short story or a novella. Anyway, so going into this, I was a bit. The reason why I give that is because I talk about Mirror Sight and my reaction to it is because that's kind of germane to my my expectations going into Firebrand. Like, I was a bit hesitant. I was a bit worried that this book would continue the that tangential nature, that tangential direction she was taking the story in, and I was both right and wrong. The thing is, Firebrand is much more consequential. Like, it is a very significant turning point in the series because it does absolutely close out a pretty major storyline. At the same time, for the majority of this book, it read like a very tangential adventure as well, because, like, if you've been reading the books at this point, by the sixth book, you know what Firebrand references, and that's exactly what we get in this book. This book is, like, the focus is much more on the focus is much more on that particular character in this one, and a certain adventure that they get themselves embroiled in. So in that nature, it felt very tangential. At the same time, that adventure is a direct result of the events of, like, the larger story. So it's not that it doesn't contribute to anything overall, and we very much see that by the end of the book when we see how Kristen brings it all together. So in a way, like, my skepticism was unfounded and my patience was rewarded, because this book actually turned out to be pretty entertaining for all of that. So yeah, like, what is Firebrand about? Essentially, the Second Empire has entered the endgame. Grandmother is after a very particular weapon that she thinks she can use to finally bring the war to Sakradia in a pretty devastating way. And as a result of that, King Zachary and his forces, they begin to they get embroiled in that, in the consequences of that particular act. Let's just see. So yeah, like, I don't want to continue anymore because this is very much spoiler. It can get very easily into spoiler territory. But what does this book deliver overall? In terms of story, it's actually interesting. It's a lot more on point than I expected. Like, given the idea, the concept for the plot as a whole, for, like, the major story that we told in here, it's very tangential. We focus on the side character, we focus on an adventure that they get themselves embroiled in. So in that, like, given the protagonist you followed in the series to date is Carrigan, in that nature, it feels very tangential. That said, it is a very consequential entry into the series because a major arc gets wrapped up. A huge arc gets wrapped up, and it very much paves the way for what comes next. Because at this point, we have three major arcs that have been kind of dabbled with. We have the one that the series started with. We have the Second Empire one, which has been going for a few books now, and we have the one introduced in Mirror Sight. So this very much wraps up one of those arcs in a pretty epic way, and just paves the way for things to go to get even wilder from here. And from what I've heard about Winterlight, I wasn't given any spoilers, I wasn't told anything, but I was told, like, Winterlight is one of the best books in the series. So with the way that this particular book sets the stage and the way that events are kind of lining up, that gets me very excited for Winterlight. So in terms of the writing and the character focus and all of that, it's very much a standard entry for Kristen Britton. Like, as much as the story meanders and it goes in directions that we don't necessarily find engaging, or no, that's putting it, that's not putting it correctly. It's not that we don't find it engaging. It's just that it's not as compelling as some of her other stories or other plot lines or other sub acts and these kind of things. As much as it may not be as compelling, it is very much relevant to what goes on. Like, everything builds on itself in here. At this point, I can't even really call this book tangential as much as as this major storyline of it can feel like it, if that makes sense. So there's that. She brings her signature character focus to the Firebrand character in particular, and we get with this crazy adventure that they get embroiled in, and through that adventure, like, so many different things get introduced to the book. Like, this is the sixth book in the series, and new things are being introduced. New things are being they're introduced, they're deployed in interesting ways as well. Like, they lead, the questions they raise and the ideas that they raise, you can already tell that there's going to be some interesting things to come in the future when those particular nuggets get developed on more. So in terms of all of that, like, it's very much standard for Kristen Britton when it comes to this series. Much more so than Mirrorsight, I would say. So there's all of that. But by far, the book the thing that really makes this book stand out is just the I would say almost the pacing, because at the start of it we have we just have this relatively slow story as we follow what happens with Firebrand, and that we have some intense political ramifications to this book as as that aspect of it gets introduced with what's going on in Sakradia and the challenges that's faced by the characters there. So, like, that's another way that this book in particular is consequential. And then we have we just even though Carrigan isn't as primary a focus in this book as she typically is, we do get some we get some very relevant character and relationship development when it comes to her with this book, because of some of the way that the relationship dynamics with her and some of the other characters change. And she's not even involved. She's not even involved in one particular consequential scene, and you just know it's going to really stir the pot moving forward. So there's that. Like, this in terms of all that, like, this book very much delivers. It for a book that can feel very tangential, but it's not. It does a good job of raising the intensity and the excitement for the main focus of this series, like the character dynamics, character relationships, and that kind of thing. It's weird. Like, I almost want to say, like, this book is almost at odds with itself, but it works. It really works well. It's just like, I mean, I personally don't like the direction that Kristen Britton initially takes with this book, but clearly she had a vision in mind, and it works. It very much works. Is the only way I could put it. And then we have the end of the series, where, for me, it feels like the entire start of the book was a red herring, because things suddenly take a very intense twist, a very engaging, a very compelling twist. Like, at that point, when things change at about the midpoint to the 75% mark in this book, like, at that point, I just had to finish this book to find out how this is going to, how could this possibly play out, because once again, things were slowly developing and building up, and you're not ready for how this book ends, is the best way to put it. Like, this is the book, this is one of those books that the journey to the end isn't necessarily as interesting as what happens in the end. That's I think that's the perfect way to describe this particular book. Either way, like, it turned out to be a very good reading experience overall, a very intense one, given just so many changes in the character dynamics and all of that. And that's even, and mind you, all of that is just my thoughts surrounding the Firebrand character. That's not even surrounding some of the side quests that are involved in here, because make no mistake, as much as I keep saying that, oh, you know, Firebrand is the primary focus, or reads like the primary focus of this book, Carrigan is very much present. Carrigan has very much a huge role in this book, as you would expect. And she's not necessarily a side character so much as there. It's almost like this book operates with like dual MCs. And that leads to some very interesting directions where it comes to the long-term ramifications of just the relationships and between these characters for this series. And let's be realistic, at this point that's pretty much all we're here for. We're here for the drama, we're here for the suspense. That's the best way to put it. So all in all, this turned out to be a surprising installment in the series for me. I was hesitant going into it because of the way that my reaction to Mirror Sight. But this turned out to be initially a pleasant surprise and then a really good surprise, because by the end I was really enjoying this book. So yeah, now I'm expecting it to get even better, because everything I've heard about Winterlight, just from random stuff, I made the mistake of Googling online and seeing people's reactions to Winterlight. Like, from that, I have very high expectations for Winterlight, and I hope it delivers. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Firebrand. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.